So I'm very happy to have another smiling young face with us. Hello, everybody. Good to be back. Right now, we have with us Divyanshi Sharda. Let's listen to her. Over to you, Divyanshi.
Good evening, sir. It's truly an honor to be invited to this show. I'm actually very happy that I got a chance to come here since I had been seeing a lot of other videos with many brilliant minds coming to this platform and speaking on very illuminating issues. So I've always wondered what it would feel like because I've never been a part of anything like this before. And I'm very grateful that I've got the chance to be here. So, I believe that something I would like to speak about something in particularly, I am very passionate about. So, my work as a student and my interests as a student who enjoys partaking in research is to focus on the realm of rural development because I feel that this is an area that receives very little attention from a lot of people in our generation in particular. So we see that, of course, there is a lot of focus on urban affairs and how we should uh, take up the trajectory of developing our urban spaces more sustainably, which I feel is absolutely relevant, which I feel is also a pressing issue that everybody needs to keep in mind. But looking at India's villages, where majority of the population still lives, I feel the reason that it continues to be an underserved place is uh, greatly due to the fact that people don't try to develop a bond towards the rural areas. They don't try to go back and actually settle there and listen to the people what they want, how to undertake development in those regions. So I feel something along the lines of sustainable rural empowerment is an area that really fascinates me, and that's why I have been trying my level best to understand what it's about, learn more about it, write a little about it, although I haven't written much in any way, but I'm trying to read up as much as I can. Interestingly, my university, OP Jindal Global University, is situated right in the middle of a village itself. So all our neighboring areas are the rural areas of Haryana, and we have undertaken field visits where we actually go and speak to the locals. We understand what their stories are like, what they have to say, how they want the country to look like. And I feel that is something very important for the youth of India to realize and to get connected with. And the more brilliant minds we have coming in the direction of rural development, coming along the lines of how to ensure the rural citizens self-empower. So this is a very interesting concept that recently a lot of scholars have been talking about, and it sounds like a new invention. It sounds like an innovative approach, but I personally feel the concept of self-empowerment has been the crux of the Indian civilization since thousands of years.
Okay.
So, if you would look at our history, if you would look at so many beautiful elements of our own culture, of our own tradition, we would find extremely interesting stories where we hear about how, through those stories, individuals are implored to do good based out of their own belief and not unnecessarily feel the need to depend on people to achieve their own goals in life. And the very idea of finding divinity within yourself is based off of the idea of is based off the idea that you yourself are empowered, so you don't need to depend on any external source, any external validation to feel strong, to feel sacred. So I feel that such philosophical, theological ideas of self empowerment have definitely existed since throughout Indian history. And in fact, a lot of the socio-economic developmental strategies that the world is realizing now, has been in practice in India since hundreds and thousands of years. I'll just give you one example, sir. So, a very renowned economist, the first woman economist to win the Nobel Prize, her name was Eleanor Ostrom, Dr. Eleanor Ostrom, and she spoke at length about why common property ownership is one of the most sustainable ways to manage an economy, why equitable distribution of resources is a society that we should be working towards, and that economic justice is not mutually exclusive from economic efficiency. If you
Mhm.
want an efficient society, it has to be just. So this idea of commons, this idea of a community owning a land with for collective welfare, not just for your
Mhm.
individual rights, but for everyone at large. This
Mhm.
notion has been in practice has been in practice amongst the rural communities of India, particularly the Adivasi and Dalit communities, since hundreds and thousands of years.
Mhm.
So I feel that these are very beautiful knowledge systems that
Mhm.
India has done a remarkable job in preserving, that the
Mhm.
marginalized communities of our country has done a remarkable job in preserving. And I feel that India actually should continue to internalize these policies as part of the state policy as well.
Mhm.
So I'll give you another example, sir. We have so much of intellectual wealth within our own country that at times even baffles us, and at times we ourselves are lost as to how to go about it, because ultimately we do see that there is a lot of conservatism in our society as well. Sadly, there are um, some institutions that are very oppressive, that are very um, discriminatory, but there are also indigenous solutions that work towards it, that work against it, and that work to create an equitable society.
Mhm.
So another very interesting example is something that the Indian government looked at, and even was one of the first governments in the entire world, not just in the South Asian context, but it was one of the first countries in the entire world to actually institutionalize this collective venture as part of government policy. So almost everybody who works in the realm of rural development knows about the concept of self-help groups, knows
Yes.
about the concept of women coming together, pooling in their money,
Yeah.
a collective form of savings which acts as credit for the poor in times
Mhm.
of difficulty, which increases the social mobility of the poor and the marginalized, especially the women in their households. So the very first thought that would come to our mind is, oh, this is a recent policy. This is a 1975 integrated rural development scheme that came about from there. And then we had Swarna Jayanti Swarozgar Yojana. But in fact, systems of collective community based savings have been in India since hundreds of years.
Mhm.
So, in the South, there were actual societies, financial societies, which were called chittis, where people would come together, pool in their money. It was like a revolving fund. It
Yeah.
was fluid, so it would give you liquidity. It was at a low interest rate, which would make it even more affordable for the low income groups. So, in this way, there were always institutions of human security. There were always institutions of sustainable institutions of economic justice that have been in place in India for a long time. And I feel that policy making in today's world, particularly if we talk about the rural areas, should seek to converge these traditional ideas which are equitable, which are inclusive, with the mandates of the modern day welfare state that India is. So, apart from these instances, there are many other case studies which one can look at. The concept of, in fact, it's not just India, many other countries. For instance, there is a very renowned organization that works as community paralegals,
Mhm.
offering their localized services to the poor so that they can access legal aid more easily
Mhm.
and they can empower themselves much better. So, So the crux of, and in fact this initiative of community paralegals was very successful in in some countries of Africa, particularly Sierra Leone, where this
Mhm,
organization is called Namati. They did a fantastic job
mhm,
in working for protecting the land rights of the local tribal populations in a few places. So the way I, in particular, sir, visualize rural development is to make it as community oriented, as uh, as endogenous as possible. So, what essentially do I mean when I say endogenous? I feel
mhm,
that there is a general terminology we use when it comes to policy making, when it comes to decision making, that there is either a top down approach or a bottom up approach, or there is something which tries to strike a balance between the two.
mhm,
However, the kind of policy making that I feel is very, very important, and I feel something that would make a lot of impact,
mhm,
is that we try to turn the bottom up approach into a more circular format,
mhm,
where gradually the most uh, socioeconomically disadvantaged groups in society, especially the women in the communities, come together. They become the representatives, they become the implementers of public institutions,
mhm,
they become the public service, the executives of public
mhm,
service delivery. They take charge of implementing governance in the areas they live, because countless studies have shown that accountability increases significantly the more services are made localized, the more you have the independence and strength of local governments functioning properly, functioning with adequate financial resources, adequate infrastructure, the more powerful the local community would be. So, in fact, why do I say the most structurally disadvantaged, disenfranchised groups should be empowered, so that as they rise up from that bottom up version of policy making, they come to a position of power and they eventually break that top down bottom up hierarchy, and they create a sustainable circular model of governance where
mhm,
every single element,
mhm,
whether he or she is a non state actor, whether he or she is a state actor, all come together in a harmonious um, network of
mhm,
working towards local empowerment.
mhm,
So it is not a hierarchy, it should not be a hierarchical process. It should be a lateral network which is as strengthened as it can be. So
mhm,
yes, it sounds very utopian, it sounds very idealistic, that how can you completely get rid of, top down directions, how can you completely get rid of um, an official sitting above you who is giving you orders. Definitely, that is a more efficient managerial strategy that we can't completely get rid of, or maybe should not even completely get rid of. But our objective is to ensure that in those systems of power, where certain individuals coming from privileged families have attained that level of agency in society, that the poor communities, the marginalized communities, they are not left behind, and they get an roughly equal seat at the table, so that they can negotiate, they can come into discussions with those in power, and eventually, with those negotiations, with those discussions, with those community based feedbacks that would constantly keep happening over and over again,
mhm, mhm.
the differentiation between, at least a very steep differentiation between who is structurally disenfranchised and who is not, would start to vanish. So this is, I feel, a very important idea that should be encouraged in the realm of rural development, at least.
Well, you have just validated the whole idea behind this Vidped series. Because the idea was to give young people a chance to talk about what they want to talk about in the way they want
Hmm.
to talk about, keeping in mind that the young people have their own ideas, their own thinking. And you have
Yes, sir.
just proved it. You just proved it. You talked quite extensively about your own ideas, your own thinking, and I'll follow up with you offline. But right now, I'm just saying that, look, thank you for such a well prepared and such a well thought out kind of idea. It's more than an idea, it's an approach to development.
Yes, yes.
And let's see what we can do with it. But in the meantime, let's perhaps not discuss this, because this is not the point of this format. Let's also discuss some other things you have done, such as your college. How did you decide your course for BA? What are your other interests and so on? I will discuss offline with you the ideas. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So let's
Thank you so much. Yes, sir. Sorry.
go ahead.
Uh-huh. Thank you, sir. I'm happy that at least my ideas resonated with you so much, because it's a little tough to convince people that we need to make these kind of changes in the system, and how do we go about it? Because at times, even when we speak about these things abstract in an abstract way, it sounds very lovely and very brilliant. Oh wow, we should definitely do this. But um when we start objectively quantifying it in terms of practical measures, actionable policy instruments that need to be taken, it starts sounding a little inconvenient. But yes, we will definitely go into a detailed discussion on that later. So the reason why I chose this course, coming from a completely different state, coming from a completely different city, was always
Which
due
state
to.
and which city?
So I come from the state of West Bengal. I come from Kolkata, and I have always been, since I was a student in my school, since I was 12 or 13 years old, I've always been very passionate about joining the civil services, working as a public servant for the welfare of the country. So, in addition to this, I have always wanted to, because I always had this plan, because I always had this dream in mind. I wanted to study something that would give me as much knowledge as possible on how I can work towards the, or at least do my duty as a good citizen of the country, towards making a more equitable, sustainable society. So I was initially thinking of taking a political science course, but later on, when I stumbled upon a public policy bachelor's degree at Jindal, I was absolutely enamored by it, because the course structure, the kind of multidisciplinary approach it had, the form of assessment it undertook in order to improve learning outcomes, was something that really fascinated me. And I was almost certain that I would definitely go ahead with this, and I did. So that brought me here to Jindal in 2021. I have been there. I've It's my final year of undergraduation, and I have thoroughly enjoyed this course. Although initially, when I started in the first semester, I wasn't very sure as to whether I would go into rural development or something else, perhaps something like education, healthcare. I wasn't very clear about one particular discipline to work for. However, as I gradually um, moved through my semesters, as I gradually came to the second and the third sem, I started. Our course content was so great that we got to read a lot about the challenges facing rural India. We got to read a lot about how institutions work, how people react, why challenges in rural India are so drastically unique, and they're so brilliant when it comes to how the people respond to the challenges. Because so we as city folk, we are so privileged, we don't understand the resilience the rural poor have, and we tend to sort of, not all of us certainly, but due to, not out of bad intentions, but mostly due to unawareness, we have this idea that they don't know much, we must educate them, we must make them aware. In fact, they are more economical than us. The rural poor has much more knowledge and much more prescience about how to go about their lives than us. So, as I started few courses on rural India, studying about rural India, I also started some field visits as part of my core curriculum. I went to the nearby villages of Sonipat. I talked to the villagers, I talked to the women, I talked to men and children, everybody. And that just drew me much closer to the hinterlands of our country. And that just made me realize that if I want to work somewhere, this is where I want to work.
Okay.
And it's so beautiful, sir, that no matter how socioeconomically disadvantaged that household was, they would never let you go away or let you leave their house without offering you a sumptuous meal or something very refreshing to drink. So that kind of a loving, warm connection is still very much alive in our rural areas, and it's something which should motivate us all the more to go back and work with them. So that is how my passion for working towards rural development came about. Is so much so that I even my first internship was with Dr. Kiran Bedi's organization, Navjyoti India Foundation. I worked as an intern there. I went to the villages in the outskirts of Gurgaon. I observed a lot of things I didn't know earlier, and that motivated me so much to work for this particular in this particular domain, that my subsequent internship with the government of Haryana was the most engaging and challenging internship that I had ever undergone, because I got to know the intricacies of governance, public governance, from the perspective of the state, and how difficult and how crucial, the more difficult it is, the more vital it is for those institutions to actually implement and stay there for the people in the villages. So I went as part of it, as an intern. I specifically chose a rural development department as under the state government. I went and I worked there. I collected data. I made a report on it. I engaged with a lot of many other women as part of self-help groups. So that was a very thrilling experience for me. And since then, my mind has been completely made that this is my calling. And yes, so that is what I even try to focus on when I do my research. Even when I have to write an essay as part of my college coursework, I try to put it in the context of rural India and how this policy or how this theory would play out there. So I try to apply every single knowledge, every single aspect or component of knowledge that I am learning as part of my coursework, every single mechanism, policy instrument, technical expertise that is being endowed on me. I am trying to apply that as much as I can in the real world. And I just hope it goes along well with your blessings.
Okay. Any tips you have for younger people?
I would say younger people are probably, not probably, I would say your contributions as the youth of India would be the most crucial. So, the first thing that I felt brought a big change in me as a young person wanting to work in India's underserved regions is that develop empathy as much as you can. Try to go beyond yourself. Doesn't mean you stop feeling bad about yourself whenever anything bad happens to you, but develop the sense of trying to relate with other people and the negative experiences they go through, the positive experiences they go through. Even if you can't stand with them at every point of time, financially, physically, that's not possible, but try to feel their existence, relate to it as much as you can, and understand that your perspective as a young person is not always correct just because you have read up about something. Always have humility, always be always be ready to be corrected about something. Do not be egoistic that once you have made up your mind about a particular thing on how to do it, that is the golden truth and nothing but it. But develop a sense of respect, some compassion. I feel that these key jewels of our cultural heritage, that the first thing our tradition teaches us is to develop compassion even towards inanimate, even towards uh, beings that can't speak. So be as empathetic as you can. Read up about those who are less privileged as much as you can and feel the struggle they go through. So I feel that would change you significantly. And as a conjunction to this point, as an addendum to this point, try to develop yourself spiritually, because that brings in a lot of tolerance, that brings in a brilliant perspective on how you should see the world, that makes you very happy and content with yourself, and doesn't make you uh, constantly feel the need to again depend on others for your happiness, to the point that you would just look at a tree and you will feel happy.
Okay.
So develop a sense of spiritual identity, and once you do that, you will feel how integrally you are connected to the person in front of you who may not have as much as you, but since he or she is part of your family, it is your moral duty to work towards their welfare and to make sure they are able to empower themselves.
Okay.
I feel this would be my tip.
Well, that's very eloquent and very powerful, I would say. Okay, I think we can, I think you have a lot to say, but I think you've said the main things that you wanted to convey. So let's end this here. Maybe we'll catch up with you once again after a year to see where you are. But
For certain.
in the meantime, let's say bye to the viewers. I'll be back with another young person or an expert soon. Bye till then. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.